Welcome back to the Nerdy Grail and welcome to another ranking video here today. Now you're probably thinking, hang on a minute, I'm fairly certain you've done a ranking video where you ranked all 34 MCU movies last year on this exact day, the 29th of August, back when Deadpool and Wolverine was the newest MCU movie out, and that is correct. So it's exactly 1 year to this day that I did my original ranking of every MCU film, and I've decided that I wanted to redo it, do a bit of an updated version, because I wasn't overly happy with how that video turned out. It's been exactly a year since I've done that video, so I've rewatched most of those MCU movies. My opinions of them have changed, so some films are lower on the list, some films have now gone up in my estimation, and you've got to keep in mind we have had 3 new MCU movies since I did the version with Deadpool and Wolverine. We had Captain America Brave New World, Thunderbolts, and most recently, the Fantastic Four First Steps. And I also thought, since we've got a long gap now till our next MCU film, which is Spiderman Brand New Day, which comes out, I believe, sometime in July 2026. So we've got just under a year to wait till our next MCU movie. I thought, let's do a ranking where we can now rank all 37 MCU movies, but this time I'm going to do it a little bit differently. I'm going to do it in a tier list format where I'm going to rank them from, say, S rank to F rank and give you my thoughts and opinions on them. But keep in mind, like any ranking video, this is just my personal opinion. My list is probably going to vastly be different to yours, and that's okay. But without any further ado, I think we can all agree that there's been some really massive highs in the MCU, but also some dramatic lows. So let's get straight into this ranking where I'm going to rank all 37 MCU movies. It's going to be a long one, so sit tight. Alright then, so here is the tier list ranking every MCU movie. We've got Iron Man 1 from 2008 all down the one end. And then on the other end, we have got Fantastic Four First Steps from 2025. So here you can see how I'm going to do the ranking. So we've got S, A, B, C, D, E, F. Pretty self-explanatory. So S is going to be the best of the best. So these films are almost perfection. We've got A, which is going to be great. B, which is going to be good. C, which is going to be okay. D, which is going to be bad. E, which is going to be terrible, and F is going to be just ignore it and skip it. It shouldn't even be a movie, pretty much, is how I'm going to go about this ranking. So we've got lots of movies to talk about, 37 in total, so let's just jump straight into it with Iron Man 1 from 2008, which obviously this set the template, set this whole universe going. Robert Downey Jr. does a fantastic job as Iron Man. I think we can all agree. His I am Iron Man reveal at the end of the movie, which was both expected and unexpected, really set the tone for the whole MCU. You see him grow through that movie alone, but obviously over the course of the whole MCU, he grows as a person, you know, becoming from this, you know, billionaire playboy philanthropist who probably wouldn't sacrifice himself for anyone, who then by the end of his tenure sacrifices himself for the whole universe and the whole multiverse to defeat Thanos. I think it's a really, really solid movie. Going back to watch it is quite fun. It's obviously a bit more lower scale compared to what we're used to now, especially with multiverse and stuff like that. But I think it's a fairly solid movie. Pretty good movie. A fun one that I like to go back and rewatch. I'm going to put it up in A tier. Some people may think it should be maybe B tier or lower. Some might even put it in S because it's the one that started it all. I can't deny nostalgia does creep into a bit of a factor here, but I have changed my opinions on Iron Man from before. I love Iron Man. The Incredible Hulk, which finally has had a lot more relevance after the events of Captain America Brave New World. I have a bit of a soft spot for The Incredible Hulk. I know a lot of people aren't a massive fan of it. For the longest time, people were like, is this really part of the MCU? Can we count it? It does have a cameo at the end from Robert Downey Jr., who's trying to recruit Bruce, more or less. You know, obviously, there's lots that comes in. You know, Samuel Stearns, who becomes the leader at the end of this movie, who then comes back in Brave New World. There's lots. Edward Norton, I think, does a good job job as Bruce Banner. Would have been interesting to see how he would have portrayed it in future films. Not saying that Mark Ruffalo hasn't done a fantastic job, but I just think Edward Norton would have been interesting. So, in my opinion, I'm actually going to put The Incredible Hulk up here in B tier because I have some enjoyment out of it. I like it when it's really tense. I love it when he's checking his little pacemaker to make sure that his heart rate doesn't go over a certain thing, otherwise he transforms. That would have been an interesting thing to have brought back with Mark Ruffalo, but they decided to scrap that. But I thought that was a nice little touch. Made it more intense because he would check it every once in a while and think, oh god, I'm going to turn into the Hulk. The Abomination I thought was done really, really well in this movie. The effects and the CGI on the Hulk and stuff, yeah, they do look a bit dated and strange, but what can you do? Iron Man 2, I'm not a massive fan of Iron Man 2, and this might surprise some people, but I'm only going to put Iron Man 2 in C tier. You know, Whiplash as a villain is alright, but he doesn't really strike me as anything too threatening. Obviously, we had the actor who played Rhodey in the first Iron Man movie got replaced with Don Cheadle, who does a fantastic job, and he's been Rhodey ever since, and I think he does great. You get a bit of conflict between Iron Man and Rhodey, who then becomes War Machine. This gives you the introduction of characters like Black Widow, who takes centre stage as well. Scarlett Johansson taking the role was really good. Nick Fury comes into this a lot more. You know, the stepping stones of the MCU are starting to come into place now. I think it's quite a fun little movie. It's nothing terrible. It's okay. I will put it on when I do a rewatch of Marvel, but it's nothing like spectacular, if I'm perfectly honest. 4-1, I also feel the same way about 4-1. I'm not a massive fan of 4-1. I don't think it's terrible. I used to think it was a really bad movie, but upon rewatch, there is stuff to like about it. I love the relationship that Thor has when he first goes down to Earth. You know, it's proper, you know, fish out of water, you know, almost like alien species has come down to Earth and has to try and adapt to life. He's had all his powers stripped from him by his father and has to prove his worthiness. I think Loki is really good. Tom Hiddleston does a great job. You know, Anthony Hopkins as Odin is really, really good. You know, all the Earthbound characters like Jane and stuff, really, really good as well. Quite nice. You know, and I love how they paint Asgard. I love the end credits song as well. It's just got that whimsical aspect to it, and I think it is really good. And also shows how Chris Hemsworth as Thor grows from this movie all the way up to what he is by the end of films like Thor Ragnarok and Thor Love and Thunder and stuff like that. So yeah, it's not terrible, but just nothing spectacular for me. Captain America, the First Avenger. Again, I think this one's a pretty solid movie. B tier, so I think it is a good movie. Took me ages to watch Captain America, the First Avenger. I don't know why, I just skipped over it. And I just never got back to watching it. I even bought it on physical media. And I just never went back to watch it, and I don't know why. I think it is really, really good. I think Chris Evans is fantastic as Captain America, both before he has the serum and after. You know, how he lays himself down on the line for people. You know, he has that weak little exterior to start with, and then he gets all the muscles and stuff. I think it's good. I think Red Skull, interesting villain as well. Yeah. It's a nice film, and like I said, the first phase of MCU sets up each of your core heroes for the Avengers movie at the end. So you get an Iron Man film, a Hulk film, a Thor film, a Captain America film. You know, Black Widow comes in during the Iron Man film as well. You know, just Hawkeye doesn't get an awful lot of time to shine, but he does when it comes to the Avengers. But yeah, I think Captain America, the First Avenger, is a pretty decent movie overall. Avengers Assemble is the first movie that is going up into the S tier. I mean, come on, did we really expect it was going to go any lower than maybe an A tier? It is exactly what we were expecting in the MCU and exactly what we wanted. The group of heroes that we've built up over the last 4 years at that point, because Avengers Assemble came out in 2012, finally coming together as a big team up to take down Loki and a big threat that's coming to New York, and it's done great. Robert Downey Jr., Chris Evans, Chris Hemsworth, Scarlett Johansson, Jeremy Renner, Samuel Jackson, Mark Ruffalo taking over as Hulk, who does a fantastic job. Giving Hulk a little bit of a redesign is quite nice as well. You know, I think the comedy, and it has some of the best lines which come back up later. Like I said, it sets up that Iron Man and Captain America don't get on very well. They constantly back and forth at each other. The line where Captain America accuses Tony of not being the person who will lay down on the ground. You know, he won't sacrifice himself for someone. But then obviously that comes back up later, showing how Tony grows. Fantastic storytelling, brilliant pacing. I love it. Great movie. If there's one movie from the MCU Phase 1 you should watch Avengers Assemble. I mean, obviously, it helps with the prior knowledge of the previous films, but you can sort of watch it and get what's going on. Moving then into Phase 2, we've got Iron Man 3. Now, I actually prefer Iron Man 3 a little bit more than Iron Man 2. I don't know whether it's the drama of it and the intensity of it, I think, is good. And I actually don't mind the little comedic twist that they put on the Mandarin in this movie compared to what happens later on in Shang-Chi. It is played for laughs, don't get me wrong, and the trailers for this movie did lie to you a little bit, making it seem like, Iron Man's going to be taking on this big terrorist organization run by the Mandarin, and it's going to be very serious for the last Iron Man movie. Because at that point, we thought this was going to be the last time we'd see Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man, which obviously turns out not to be the case, but he does destroy all of his suits at the end, It does take Iron Man on the next step of his journey. He encounters a little boy halfway through it and sort of becomes a bit of a mentor, fatherly figure to that child. I think it's done really, really nicely. It does break up the pace a little bit. It is a nice light-hearted movie with a little bit of a dark twist to it. I quite like Iron Man 3. Silly, yes. Fun, silly, also yes. For the Dark World, yeah, sorry, this one's going down into D tier for me. I know some people might be like, "Ooh, what's wrong with For the Dark World?" Yeah, not a huge fan. The Dark Elves creatures, I can't remember what they're called now. They're not the best villains, if I'm perfectly honest. Christopher Eccleston, plays the core villain of this movie. He does all right, but he's not very memorable. And that's the problem with For the Dark World. I don't think it's a very memorable movie. It doesn't stand out from all the other MCU movies. The relationship that you get between Thor and Loki is nice, especially after the death of their mother, and how you see that takes a toll on Loki, how he puts up a front, and then when people aren't looking, he just falls to pieces. I think that's done really nicely. So there's some good brotherly stuff there. I like that. And I do love a bit of the banter that they have between them, especially when Loki disguises himself as people like Captain America. I think that's a bit fun. Jane is a little bit annoying in this, if I'm honest. It sets up, obviously, more of the Infinity Stones as well, but yeah, it's one that I tend to sort of gloss over a little bit. I'm not huge on For the Dark World, to be honest. Captain America, the Winter Soldier, some people may say overrated, which I can kind of see where you're coming from if you think it's overrated, but personally, I think Captain America, the Winter Soldier deserves the rap it gets. It's just seen usually as a really good film, and I quite like it, You focus on Captain America and Black Widow in particular, so Black Widow gets more time to shine. You've got S.H.I.E.L.D. has been infiltrated, there's traitors at large, it's, there's stuff going on, it's almost like a Johnny English espionage style movie. Captain America's got to go undercover. He bumps into his old friend Bucky again, who he thought was dead and gone, but actually he's been taken over. He's been reprogrammed with this Winter Soldier programming, and he's sent out to kill and destroy, and he's sort of got to verse his old friend. It's really, really cool, and I quite like it as well. The pacing's really good. The classic elevator scene where he's standing in the elevator and you've got all these S.H.I.E.L.D. agents who are actually they're not who they say they are. Let's leave it as that. And then he has that massive fight and he knocks them all out by the end. I think it's hilarious. Really good movie, solid. Definitely deserves A tier for me. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1 is going immediately up into S tier. I think it is definitely the best, in my opinion, for the Guardians upon rewatch. I've done loads of rewatch of the Guardians trilogy in particular, and I just love how fun it is. The music and soundtrack is gorgeous. The visuals of flying through space and going to the different planets. The chemistry between the original crew is done great with Star-Lord and Gamora and Rocket and Groot and Drax. I think their relationship is brilliant. Love it. The comedy hits. Ronan the Destroyer, interesting villain. He's done quite well. I like him. The dance battle to save the universe is still iconic. Watch Guardians. It is a fun one. And again, don't need to do prior homework. You can just watch Guardians and have a great time. Avengers Age of Ultron. Now, I'm going to put this one in B tier. Some people may say it's lower. I actually quite like Ultron. I think Ultron as a villain is really cool, and I believe, from what I've heard, Ultron might be coming back in the Disney Plus show Vision Quest at some point. I can't remember what capacity they said, but I swear I've heard that. He won't be quite the same as he was before, but I love Ultron. I thought he was done really, really well. You know, it's introduced lots of new characters to the MCU, like Quicksilver, who was very quick-lived. Obviously, Scarlet Witch. Introduces Vision. You know, it tears the Avengers apart a little bit. Like Hulk gets sent off into space, and we don't see him again until Thor Ragnarok, so we're wondering what's going on with him. We get a bit more backstory into Hawkeye, so we get to see some of Hawkeye's family. So I'm glad that some characters get a little bit more to do. You can definitely see the Disney influence taking over a lot more in this film as well. It's got some really light-hearted tones, but some really dark stuff at the same time, which can clash a little bit, which is why it's not as good as the first Avengers. But I still think overall it's a good film. I don't really think there's a bad Avengers film. Fingers crossed Doomsday doesn't break that streak. But here we go. That is Age of Ultron. Also, Ant-Man. I think the first Ant-Man is fun. I quite enjoy the Ant-Man films. I think Ant-Man 1 is also really fun and good. Paul Rudd does a great job as Ant-Man himself. You know, I love it. You know, this guy who's like a thief. You know, he's gone to prison. You're supposed to paint him as a guy who's not the best, but he's trying. He's trying to improve for the sake of his daughter and stuff. But, you know, gets these powers or gets the opportunity to prove himself. And he does prove himself, and he's done really, really well. And he's a lovely guy. I just love Scott's relationship with everybody. All the cast and crew has done really well with Hank, with his daughter. The final fight between him and the main villain in his daughter's room on the train set, and then you get that giant Thomas the Tank Engine that breaks through the house, I think is really good and hilarious. You know, getting to use the fact that they are ants and then getting to see it from what our perspective would be, where you just see a little train set and you just see the trains falling over, but for them it's like something big and dramatic. The scope and scale of it is really good. So watch Ant-Man. Good film. Captain America Civil War for me is A tier. I think it is, and obviously in particular, the main reason it's A tier is for the airport scene, for how it sets up the future of the MCU, and also the final fight between Bucky, Steve, and Tony is emotional. In fact, I actually watched Captain America Civil War yesterday. This is my most recent MCU film that I've done in terms of a rewatch. I've been watching them out of order, but this is the most recent one I've rewatched. And watching the scene at the end where Steve and Tony are fighting each other, because obviously Tony discovers that Bucky is the one who accidentally killed his parents due to the Winter Soldier programming, and so goes rogue and just, you know, is blinded by rage. And Steve obviously having to, in between a rock and a hard place, you know, he's got his two friends here, he doesn't know what to do, he can't let Tony hurt Bucky, but he understands it's difficult. I think is just emotional, brilliant. Obviously it tears the Avengers apart. You know, it's all about the Sokovia Accords, which are written in order to control the Avengers, make sure that they're not a danger to people, or, you know, they don't cause unnecessary harm. You know, but some Avengers agree, some don't agree, and that's where the fight breaks out. Team Cap versus Team Iron Man introduces characters like Black Panther with, you know, the late great Chadwick Boseman, and obviously Tom Holland introduced as Spider-Man for the first time, so that's really good as well. So you get to see how Spider-Man interacts with these characters. They bring back Paul Rudd's Ant-Man. There's lots of heroes in this as well. Vision, Scarlet Witch, Hawkeye, you know, there's loads of characters in this. It is a bit of a mini Avengers movie. I really like it, and it is a lot of fun. It's very slow to start, but once it gets going, it gets going. Doctor Strange, the first Doctor Strange. This is going to surprise people. I think this is okay. I think the thing is, it's got really nice visuals, you know, and it's really trippy to look at. You know, obviously everything with all the magic, and when they twist the worlds or go into different dimensions or this, that, and the other, and all the spiritual stuff. I think it's all great, looks beautiful. But again, it's got a bit of a problem like For the Dark World, but not as bad, where for me it's not as memorable. I like, obviously, how you got the character of Stephen Strange, who obviously, through an accident, you know, top-class doctor, you know, this, that, and the other, medical person, and he, after an accident, he's then able to do his previous job, so he's got to try and train himself back up to do something else. He's got to try and think that there's more to it, there's more to life. I like all that stuff. It's quite nice, but yeah, it's just a bit of a slow-paced one for me. I like the stuff at the end, especially when he's full strange and he's tricking Dormammu and tricks him into a time loop, and he uses his intelligence that he's still got in order to save the day. I thought that was quite nice and quite clever. But yeah, apart from that, there's nothing really spectacular. It's okay, but nothing brilliant. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. This is the weakest of the Guardian films for me, but I still think it is a good movie. Like I said, this is going to be the lowest that you'll see a Guardians film in B tier. So that gives you an indication of Guardians 3. I still really like it. I love how they all are with each other. I like how they build on some of the characters, like Yondu in particular, who sadly doesn't make it out of this film. I think it's really nice how his relationship with Quill changes. I like the introduction of Mantis. I like Ego, who we find out who Peter Quill's dad actually is. We find out, obviously, that he's not all human, this, that, and the other. I think it was very, very dark how we find out that it was Peter's dad who ended up killing Peter's mum, and how that changes in Peter. The problem I have with this one is, even though the dynamic between the cast is great, I like that Nebula comes along for the ride halfway through the film and then sort of adapts to the crew and becomes part of their team, becomes more friendly with them by the end, which is really nice. But some of the dynamics are off. Like, I feel like Drax in particular, how mean he is to like Mantis and other characters, I think is a bit too much at times in this film and spoils it a little bit. There's just some elements I'm not keen on. I love Baby Groot though. Baby Groot is adorable. Can we all just agree Baby Groot is lush? Bring back Baby Groot. Spider-Man Homecoming. Now, this movie, as a Spider-Man movie, I'm not sure if it's really good. But as a movie, I thoroughly enjoy it. I'm going to put it up in A tier. I do really like Spider-Man Homecoming, and I have watched it so many times. I think Michael Keaton as Vulture is great. I love Tom Holland's Spider-Man. I like that Robert Downey Jr. is in this, but I just feel it takes away from Peter a little bit. He had the team up with Iron Man in Civil War. He sort of needed this to be something more on his own, and they try to imply that when Peter's the one who, once he loses his suit from a mistake during the film, he has to use a makeshift suit and stop Vulture on his own without Iron Man's help to prove himself. So I know what they're trying to do, but I think the inclusion of Iron Man sort of holds him back a little bit, and they try to make him join the Avengers at the end, and obviously he says no because he wants to still be a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. It's a fun movie, look. It's fun, lighthearted. I love it. It is great. Don't get me wrong. Like I said, Vulture is brilliant. Michael Keaton as Vulture is great. Can we bring back Michael Keaton as Vulture again, please? But I just think he needed to stand on his own a bit more. But I still love it enough to give it an A tier. Thor Ragnarok. This, for me, this is definitely going to be one of the more controversial-esque picks on this list. I adore Thor Ragnarok. If you've seen my previous list, you know my thoughts on Thor Ragnarok, so that hasn't changed. Thor Ragnarok is amazing for me, anyway. I can see why some people might not like it because it is a bit too silly, but I kind of like that they take a bit more of a comedic approach to Thor in this one, but they don't go too heavy on it. Thor Love and Thunder, which we'll get to, takes it too far. This has the perfect blend of serious enough with Hela, because they bring Hela, Thor's sister, and all into this, and causing the destruction of Asgard, because she tries to take it over, with the silliness that happens on Sakaar, with Jeff Goldblum's character, with the return of Hulk, with everything that goes on there. This is the last one for Odin. Odin unfortunately dies. Thor and Loki's relationship, they try to mend their relationship now they've lost their mother and their father. The comedy is really, really good. I love Meek and Korg as well. Lovely additions to the cast. Valkyrie, love Valkyrie. Great addition to the cast as well. There's some really good stuff here. The Grandmaster is played by Jeff Goldblum, is really good and a really fun and entertaining villain. The stuff with Hela does let this film down a little bit, but overall I think the stuff on Sakaar does make up for it. And it's nice to see what happened with Hulk, and it's nice to see that Hulk is now starting to get more of a personality of his own, you know, free from Banner a bit, because he's sort of taken the lead. And when you do see Mark Ruffalo's Bruce Banner, Banner is like a bit scared that if he ever becomes the Hulk again, he'll be stuck forever, and he doesn't want that, you know? But yeah, and this does set up the events of Infinity War by the end of this movie. Moving on then, we have got Black Panther 1. I think Black Panther 1 is a good movie. Do I think it's a great movie? Not particularly. I think the problem is that both the villain and the hero, they kind of want the same things, but the way they go about it obviously is a bit different. So think of it in like I'm a Whovian, the Doctor and the Master. They've got similar thoughts, but they go about things in different ways. One from an evil perspective and one from a good perspective. And that's sort of what you've got here with Black Panther and Killmonger, who Michael B. Jordan does a great job as Killmonger. And I think the visuals of Wakanda is lush. I think the music is brilliant. You know, this hidden city, which has lots of high levels of technology that they want to eventually... They're trying to keep from the world, but eventually they want to branch out and introduce Wakanda and the technology to the world to try and help the world. So I think they do that in a nice way. They sort of give you the traditions of Wakanda, how you get the powers done really well, how the throne can be taken. I think it is all done really interesting. I just don't think the threat level was there enough, and it felt a bit weird to put this one between Thor Ragnarok and Avengers Infinity War, if you get what I mean. Speaking of Avengers Infinity War, this one is obviously of no surprise. People won't be surprised to say that I've put Avengers Infinity War up in S tier, because it is an amazing movie from start to finish. It brings all the characters again together. The Avengers, Spider-Man, the Guardians of the Galaxy, you know, Doctor Strange. Everyone we've met so far is in this. Vision, Black Widow. Just everyone is here. Trying to stop Thanos from collecting the Infinity Stones, which all through the Infinity Saga so far, in post-credit scenes, Thanos has been teased and he's sent people off to do his bidding. They've all failed him, so now he's like, I'm going to do it myself, and this is the film where he does it himself. And I think everything works really, really well. And by the end, spoilers if you haven't seen Infinity War, but by now I'm sure a lot of people have, obviously Thanos succeeds and wipes out half of life, so then it cuts all of our favourite heroes in half. So you get the original Avengers, they get rid of half of the Guardians, Spider-Man goes, Black Panther goes, you know, Scarlet Witch and all go. It's dramatic, and I remember crying in the cinema at this movie, but it was fantastic. It is hands down one of the best MCU films ever, still to this day, and holds up despite everything that happens post it. Ant-Man and the Wasp, the second Ant-Man and the Wasp, again, like the first one, and people might be surprised, I quite like Ant-Man and the Wasp. I think it's a fun, comedic, light-hearted movie, and you kind of need it at this point, because you've just had the dramatic stuff that goes on in Infinity War. And also at that point, people were thinking, well, what happened to Ant-Man? Did Ant-Man get, you know, vanished? Because he was the only one of like the major heroes we were introduced at the time who didn't really appear necessarily in Infinity War. And so we were like, well, what happened to Ant-Man? And it sums it up in this one. This introduces you to Ghost, who comes back later in Thunderbolts, and it's just a nice light-hearted story just to sort of calm you down after the events of Infinity War. And it is a bit of fun. That's all the Ant-Man films are in particular. They're just a bit of light-hearted fun. Captain Marvel. Now, Captain Marvel, for me, look, upon rewatch, yes, it's not the best. But I don't hate it for the reasons that everyone online when the film came out hated it. That was never... I'm not even going to mention the reasons why. If you know, you know. I just didn't think it was a strong story. And, you know, Carol Danvers, you know, Brie Larson does a decent job with Captain Marvel, but it doesn't sell it enough for me. You know, the main thing that I like in this is I like the relationship between Nick Fury and Goose the Cat. Goose the Cat is my favourite part of the Captain Marvel films. But yeah, it's just not... There's not enough meat to the bone of this film, to be honest. Again, I know why they did this film at this point, because obviously Captain Marvel does play a role in Endgame to a degree, but it's just a bit of an odd one, a bit like doing the Black Panther film before Infinity War, doing the Captain Marvel one before Endgame sort of has the same feel to me. Check it out though. and see what you think. Speaking of Endgame, I'm putting Endgame in A tier. Endgame, yeah, for me, it's obviously better than Age of Ultron. Age of Ultron is unfortunately the weakest of the Avengers films, but in my opinion, it's not as strong as Infinity War because it felt very predictable. Using time travel in order to get out of the situation they were in was a bit like, oh, okay. It's a bit of, almost like an easy, like, yeah, why didn't we think of time travel? It was Ant-Man who actually thought about it, you know. I think it's nice seeing the couple of heroes that's left from the different teams work together, like having Nebula and Rocket being the only survivors of the Guardians, having to team up with the Avengers, I think is interesting. Getting to go back and see events from like the 2012 Avengers movie and the 2014 Guardians movie, I thought was nice. I did think it cheapened like the deaths of some characters from Infinity War, talking about you, Gamora, who unfortunately bring her back from the 2014 movie, meaning that all the relationships and all the character arc and then all the nice stuff we had with her, the character growth from Guardians 1, Guardians 2, and Infinity War is gone and replaced with just a shell. It's not the best, and I'm not a huge fan of that. But obviously you get Iron Man's sacrifice at the end, where he sacrifices himself to defeat Thanos once and for all. You know, coming full circle, he says his final words of "I am Iron Man." He started saying "I am Iron Man," and he ends saying "I am Iron Man." And I think it is beautiful, and the funeral scene at the end is gorgeous. And this really is the big shake-up for the MCU because you lose so many big characters in this movie. Obviously, we lose Black Widow, we lose Iron Man, we technically lose Captain America because Steve goes back and lives out his life with Peggy back all the way back from the first movie. So we lose our original Captain America. So Sam's got to like take the lead. It is the end of an era, but it is a decent end to an era. Spider-Man Far From Home. I also think, for me, this is up here. I quite like Far From Home. I know some people might say, oh, well, Far From Home is not as good as Homecoming or No Way Home, but I think it's because of Mysterio. I think Jake Gyllenhaal as Mysterio sells this movie for me. He is really, really, I like his charisma. I like his personality. I like, Mysterio being this manipulative person, the master of illusions. I don't like that he's linked to Tony Stark. I don't like that we're constantly linking all the Spider-Man villains to Tony Stark. Spider-Man needs some villains of his own. You can't all just be the Iron Man villains, so to speak. They need to be linked to Spider-Man. So I'm not a big fan of that. I loved his Master Illusion scene, obviously where he makes Peter trip out and see like a zombie Iron Man, traps him in a snow globe. I love all the visual stuff on that. And obviously this ends on a cliffhanger of him revealing Peter Parker's identity to the world, which I think is really good. And at the time, we remember thinking, oh my goodness, this is going to have major repercussions later on down the line. And obviously we got No Way Home for that. But yeah, I quite like this film. I like the school trip style, so you can go to different locations. Like you go to London and you go to Italy. You go to these different places and it's really nice to see. The Night Monkey suit, I think, was a bit of an odd choice. Wasn't huge on that, to be honest. I think Tom Holland's Spider-Man has too many suits, if I'm perfectly honest. But it is a bit fun. It is a bit of fun. And again, something a bit more light-hearted, but yet dark at the same time, coming off the back of Endgame. And this also wraps up the Infinity Saga as well. Okay, now we're moving on into the half of the MCU that I know everyone's probably been dying to see because, the first half is sort of a bit more predictable. A lot of people like the first half and like the Infinity Saga. When you get to the Multiverse Saga, it's where things start to drop off a little bit. And I can't deny, for me, Black Widow is going down here in E tier. So yeah, the first film to make it quite low. Look, this film suffers majorly from the problem that it came out at the exact wrong time. We just saw Black Widow's death. So this film means nothing. Because why would you have a setup movie or like an origin story movie? Sure, you introduce characters like Red Guardian and Yelena, which become relevant later on. But you should have done that before Endgame. I think maybe you should have swapped maybe like Captain Marvel or something around. I don't know. Just have Black Widow, that movie, come out before Endgame. this shouldn't have come out after Endgame, because it means that all like the conflicts, and whenever Natasha is like cornered or is about to die, we know she's not, because we know how she dies, and that ruins the pacing of this movie. And it's not a good way to start your multiverse saga, if I'm honest. So I'm really not a fan of Black Widow. I don't like what they did to Taskmaster. Nothing to do with the gender. Before anyone starts, that has never been a problem for me. I do not care about that. It's just from watching, Taskmaster in like video games and on TV and all sorts of other interpretations. I love how Taskmaster learns. I like how Taskmaster can be a bit witty and sarcastic with the people he fights against. I don't like how they made it just another Black Widow, to a degree, who doesn't speak, doesn't really do anything, has no real personality to them. It is very boring. And don't even get me started on when we get the Thunderbolts on Taskmaster, but not a fan, if I'm honest. And some of the effects in Black Widow don't look very good. I know, obviously, like COVID and all at the time would have not helped, but yeah, not huge. Shang-Chi though, I think Shang-Chi is a decent movie. I'm going to put it in B tier. I quite liked what Shang-Chi put out, to be perfectly fair. I like the character of Shang-Chi, and I like the villain as well. This is where we actually get to delve more into what the Mandarin should have, for some people, felt like. This is what the Mandarin should have been for a lot of people in Iron Man 3. A bit more serious, And, I just like how they make a villain who we can actually relate to. You feel sorry for them, because the whole plot is he just wants his wife back. That's pretty much it. But he'll just go to any means in order to get there. So you can kind of feel sorry for him to a degree. So I quite like that. And visually, again, it's really, really nice. Pacing is a little bit off, but I think overall, Shang-Chi does deliver. Eternals, get in that F-bin. Eternals, get in the F-bin, stay there, and we will just forget that you ever exist. I mean, it's clear that Marvel do, because let's be real, this movie came out in 2021, we are in 2025, and it took until 2025 for even a brief mention of Eternals to come back up in Captain America Brave New World. Eternals was just a slogfest from start to finish. They introduced way too many new characters. I can't even remember most of them, and to be fair, their personalities were more or less the same. You couldn't really tell them apart, to be honest. It just wasn't a good movie. It was slow, it was dark, it was boring, there wasn't any major conflict. It made you wonder, in all the trailers, it made you wonder why they weren't there for the previous events. And their excuse that they give, I still don't buy. And just the ending to this movie, it sets up so many things and none of them have paid off so far. There was 3 major setups during this movie. None of them so far have been paid off, and it has been 4 years. I don't think we're ever going to get a payoff for any of the things that happened in this movie, and I don't know if we'll ever see any of these characters again. Stay in there, stay in the F-bin. It deserves to be down there. Spider-Man No Way Home. Now, I know a lot of you are probably going to expect this to go in S tier. It is not going to go in S tier. It is actually going to go in A tier along with the other 2 Spider-Man, because I actually think of all the Spider-Man films, upon rewatch, in the same level of enjoyment. Spider-Man No Way Home, obviously, is a massive, hurrah for Spider-Man. A bit of a farewell tour of everything. It was during that period of nostalgia where bringing back all the old stuff made a lot of people happy. You brought back Tobey Maguire, you brought back Andrew Garfield, you brought back almost every villain from the previous Spider-Man films. Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin, Alfred Molina's Doc Ock, Jamie Foxx's Electro, Reese Fans' Lizard, Thomas Hayden Church's Sandman. You brought them all back, which is nice, but the problem is a lot of them didn't do anything. The Lizard, my boy, I love the Lizard, especially that incarnation of the Lizard. He didn't really do anything. Thomas Hayden Church didn't really do an awful lot as Sandman. I know there was external reasons for that as well, but they didn't do anything. Jamie Foxx's Electro and Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin are the 2 villains that get the most to do in this movie. In particular, Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin. It might as well have been another Tobey Maguire Spider-Man 1, because it was just Peter versus Goblin for most of it. Yes, it's emotional. Yes, you get the death of Aunt May. Yes, you get reminders, which is nice, where Peter saves MJ, and he looks at her and he's crying because he's like, oh, well, I couldn't do this on my Gwen, but I can do this for you. Yes, the whole world forgets Peter's Spider-Man, which I'm interested to see how that's going to come around next time, but we'll see. But yeah, I'm just... Apart from obviously just being a big nostalgia fest, when you think about the actual plot of Peter goes to Doctor Strange to try and make the world forget he's Spider-Man, to remove Mysterio's, message of revealing that he's Spider-Man to the world, it was silly. It was stupid. And how everything happened was done silly. There's loads of ways you could avoid it. Peter should have gone to the college and explained his case like Doctor Strange said he should have. Peter could have worded the question differently, worded the spell differently, stopped talking when Strange was doing said spell, let him do that spell, and maybe then do another one afterwards. It was just so easily avoided. It was just a bit silly, to be honest. But I can't deny I have fun with this movie, like everyone does. It is a great movie. People might say, why have I said all three of the Spider-Man film on the same thing? They can't be on the same... But I do have the same level of enjoyment with the Spider-Man films. I can't deny it. I suppose maybe if I want to be really picky, I'd probably maybe lower Far From Home to B tier. But other than that, I think most of them are the same. Multiverse of Madness is going down here in D tier because apart from a few visual stuff that was quite nice... Let's be real, it was not what we were expecting it to be, and it's mostly down there, not for being necessarily a bad movie, but for just being a disappointing movie, to say the least. It really was a disappointment of a movie. We expected so much, the rumours that we had, the teases. We thought it was going to be like Doctor Strange, facing the repercussions of what he did in No Way Home, and he was going to team up with Wanda to travel the multiverse and get people together and try and get himself out of trouble. That wasn't what it was at all. It was just all about Wanda going haywire, wanting her kids back that she lost due to the events of WandaVision, which, can I just say, was ridiculous. Why she couldn't have asked America Chavez, take me to a universe where their kids and Vision are alive, but they've lost their mother, and she could have done a bullshit way of saying that I've come back and then lived a life with them. I don't know. It's silly. It's stupid. Makes no sense. Visually, it's lovely, but plot-wise makes no sense and was just disappointing. The stuff with the Illuminati, killing off Reed Richards like that. Like, come on. What's the point in even introducing him if you're going to just do him like that? All that with Black Bolt, another Captain Marvel... Charles Xavier, Patrick Stewart came in. What did he do? He didn't really do anything. He came and got his neck snapped by Wanda. It was just a bit of... Sam Raimi, he did a lot for this movie, but it wasn't what we wanted. Let's be real. For Love and Thunder, yeah. Again, also this film for me is, I think. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of For Love and Thunder. I would say, yeah, it would also... I can't... No, I'm going to leave it where it is. Yeah, For Love and Thunder, again, I said earlier with Thor Ragnarok, For Love and Thunder sort of takes it too far the other way in terms of the comedy, and that is very apparent in this movie. It does take it way too far. It's really silly. It starts off with 4 teaming up with the Guardians for like the first 10-15 minutes. He then goes on his own little adventure. They bring Jane back, and she's now Mighty Thor. And so Thor sort of teams up with her to take on Gaul, like the God Slayer, who is played by Christian Bale, who has some really creepy scenes at times, don't get me wrong, especially when he's talking to the children that he's kidnapped. It's very spooky and creepy. But overall, it is just way too comedic and silly. And again, there's stuff in this movie they introduced that hasn't got paid off yet, and I don't know if it ever will. So, and the effects in this movie aren't the best either. They're pretty bad. There's been way better effects in Phase 1 of the MCU to what we got here. It's just not the best. And this is Phase 4, towards the end of Phase 4, about to be in Phase 5. So it's like, why? Then we've got Black Panther Wakanda Forever, which Wakanda Forever, I think, like Black Panther 1, is more or less on par. I think it is a pretty decent movie and a pretty nice way to wrap up this phase, and, a good tribute to Chadwick Boseman and the original Black Panther. They do it in a nice way. Namor as a villain is an interesting choice. I think Shuri does come into her own quite nicely. They do introduce Ironheart briefly in this as well, which one day I will discuss Ironheart. But yeah, I think the introduction of Ironheart here is okay. But, you know, they introduce her here so that when you watch the Disney Plus show, you already have a bit of an idea of what she's like. Shuri's outfit as Black Panther is pretty good. It's all right. It's all right. I think probably I do prefer Black Panther 1 slightly more than Black Panther 2, but they are both about on par because you still get the nice music and visuals, the nice traditional stuff from Black Panther. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Oh boy. Right, now I'm going to put this in C tier. Look. In terms of its relevancy now, it is pretty much null and void. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, you know, it was setting up all the Kang stuff, which Jonathan Majors, obviously everything that came out about him and everything that happened to him, we couldn't really avoid that. But in terms of how Jonathan Majors is in this movie, I think he does a good job as Kang. He is threatening. It does, though, however, this is the most different feel in terms of an Ant-Man movie. It's not as comedic. It feels, I think my fiance said at the time, it's very like Star Wars style in terms of like the alien creatures you see in the quantum realm and stuff, and the visuals and the music. It does to a degree, and you spend most of your time in the quantum realm. So it is the most different of all the Ant-Man films. And obviously it ends in a way where it's probably never going to get summed up properly. Yeah, it's an okay movie, but again, it suffered with stuff that was out of its control. And MODOK, do I need to talk about the design of MODOK? He's very interesting, to say the least. Yeah, again, visually, some bits look great, some bits don't look very good. It's an okay movie, but overall doesn't mean an awful lot. Guardians 3 is going up in A tier. I love Guardians 3. When I said, obviously, Guardians 2 is my least favourite and it's in B tier, you sort of got an idea of where that meant Guardians 3 is probably going to go. Is it the best Guardians? No, that's still Guardians 1. The darker tone of Guardians 3 I quite liked. I quite liked the backstory into Rocket. I'm glad we got to focus a lot on Rocket. You know, because like the first Guardians seemed to focus a lot on like Gamora in particular. Well, a bit of everyone, really, but like I felt like Gamora got a bit more screen time. The second one delved more into Peter, and then this one delves more into Rocket, and I thought that was quite nice. I liked Rocket's little friends. You know, I thought it was quite interesting, some of the concepts that they introduced, and the villain was done really, really well. You know, taking something that I've only seen in Spider-Man Unlimited and putting that on the screen here, I thought was done really, really well. Like Counter-Earth. I've only ever heard of that in Spider-Man Unlimited, so that was really interesting, and my fiance loved that. But yeah, really, really good. This is the end of the Guardians, though. The thing I didn't like in this film as well is I wasn't a huge fan, obviously, because Gamora does come back again, but obviously she doesn't have any of the relationship or bond with the Guardians, so they've got to do a reset with her, and it ruins the dynamic. I'm not a huge fan of it. The Marvels. Yes, The Marvels. Now, I know a lot of people probably expect this to be really low. And if I'm honest, I'm going to put it in here. I'm going to put in okay. I know this is just my list. Look, it's not the best. It's not the best. I can hold my hands up here. It is not the best. And the villain of this movie is very bad. Very bad and very silly. I'm mainly doing this because, firstly, like I said, I love Goose the Cat and I love all the Flurkins. I also really like Kamala Khan, and I love that she finally gets to meet her idol, and also see that she's not all she's cracked up to be. This is a don't meet your heroes style movie, where obviously all their powers get intertwined, and they're constantly, every time they use their powers, they swap with someone. So it's quite nice, you know. And I thought that was quite an interesting take. There's a singing dance number in this that I'm really not a fan of. Yeah, that's not really the best. That made me cringe like no tomorrow in the cinema. But like I said, it's the stuff with Kamala, the power swapping, the tease of the X-Men at the end of the movie. like I said, everything with Goose the Cat is what gives it the C tier for me. I know people are probably going to say, nah, that shit needs to be lower. And I can see where you're coming from. And I debatably could put it in D tier. But I don't know. I prefer, if I had to choose between watching the Marvels or any of the ones that's lower than Marvels, I probably would choose the Marvels, if I'm honest. Then we got Deadpool and Wolverine. This one is going straight up into S tier. We were dying and waiting for Deadpool and Wolverine for such a long time to bring Ryan Reynolds' Deadpool into the MCU. We got Hugh Jackman back as Wolverine, you know, after we thought he was going to be gone from Wolverine after Logan's death in Logan, which is one of my favourite superhero comic movies of all time. I thought the relationship between these two was great. This was like a final hurrah for the Fox universe, seeing Chris Evans come back as the Human Torch, you know, Tyler Mane as Sabretooth. You know, you've got lots of characters that appear in this. You've got Juggernaut, you know, Cassandra Nova, and what's her name? I think it's Cassandra Nova. You know, the Charles Xavier's sister as the main villain. She was done really, really well. I liked her. She was very threatening. I just thought it was a fun, funny movie. Peggy Dogpool. I finally met Peggy at a Comic-Con recently. Adorable. I love Dogpool. Love it. Brilliant. Lovely. Oh, if you have the chance to meet Peggy at a convention, please do. She's brilliant. But yeah, just everything about this movie I love. And it is hilarious from start to finish. Please can we get more Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman in future MCU films? But yeah, easily in the S tier. Okay, and now we are officially into the movies that weren't on my previous list. So we've got the 3 new movies. So firstly, we've got Captain America Brave New World. Which Captain America Brave New World, yeah, is going down here in C tier. The problem with Captain America Brave New World is it revealed everything in the trailers for it, such as, you know, Red Hulk, and it's basically the Incredible Hulk 2, but with Captain America. And it played all its cards in the trailer. So I was just sat in the cinema thinking to myself, well, when's he going to turn into Red Hulk? You know, you got Harrison Ford, who plays Thaddeus Ross, because the previous actor had sadly passed away. And he does a good job as Ross as well. President Ross this time, mind. You know, Sam as Captain America, he does a pretty good job. But I don't know, it's just a bit of a mixed mess, really. They should have just made this an Incredible Hulk movie as opposed to a Captain America movie. And yeah, you know, Ross is only Red Hulk towards the end, but they build up this mystery of Ross taking these pills and who did he get the pills from. But when you've already shown in the trailer that he turns into Red Hulk, we already know that those pills are turning him into Red Hulk. So why did you play all your cards and base your whole movie on a character that we already knew was coming? It meant that in the cinemas, we were all just sat there going, well, come on now, we got like 20 odd minutes surely now. And yeah, and it's just bad storytelling, if I'm honest. You sort of forget about the Captain America stuff, but hey, they decided to make Eternals a bit more relevant again, which you know my opinion on Eternals, as you can see in the list. Thunderbolts. Thunderbolts, for me, I thought is B tier. I thought it was actually alright. My major problem with the Thunderbolts, firstly, is Taskmaster. What's even the point of Taskmaster at this point? They killed off Taskmaster within like her first scene. And she was in all the promotional stuff to start with, and then got wiped from the promotional stuff. So everyone was then like, "Ooh, is Taskmaster actually going to survive?" And also, Taskmaster was one of the only ones of the Thunderbolts who wasn't credited originally for Doomsday. So that we started to piece it all together. But yeah, I'm not a huge fan of that, and I also don't like that the Thunderbolts are all basically the same character. That's the problem they have as well. They're all the same. They're all basically Black Widows. You know, Yelena, Red Guardian, John Walker, Ghost. You know, all of them are like the same character, just with minor differences. Like Ghost's obviously ability to phase, and you know, John getting the shield because he's, you know, a wannabe Captain America. If you've watched Falcon and the Winter Soldier, you know, they have a good relationship together, the team. You know, Bucky as well's in this. But I don't know. And obviously hiding the fact that this was then later titled as the New Avengers was a bit, We all knew something was up when they put an asterisk at the end of this title, that was going to change. Yeah, it doesn't feel right, this team. It's trying to be Suicide Squad, but a bit more of a diet version of Suicide Squad. It's still a good movie and I had fun. I thought Bob was a really good one as well. Sentry. But yeah, it was okay. It was an okay movie. A Fantastic Four First Steps. For me as well, I thought, yeah, this for me as well also was B tier. You know, I thought it was fairly decent. It was nothing like over the top spectacular, but there was nothing downright horrible about it either. This is definitely one of the better versions of the Fantastic Four as a team. They do work really well together. Galactus is done really well. I like Silver Surfer. This is basically like Rise of the Silver Surfer number 2, really, or 2.0. But it is really good. They work well as a team. I like that they don't dwell too much on how they've got their powers. They're a well-established team. You know, the only thing I didn't really buy is I didn't really buy Sue and Johnny as brother and sister in this movie. They felt more like college friends. And I feel like they also didn't give Sue much of a character. They focused a lot on Reed, Ben and Johnny, and they sort of made Sue just mum. You are just mum and you just want to look after your child. That is all you want, you know. And I thought that was a bit of a letdown. Galactus, I said, looked brilliant. I loved his scope and scale. They should have made him bigger in some of the scenes as well. But yeah, and I thought the colour and the music and the visuals, the fact it wasn't actually set in our MCU universe and they're going to come into that now, I thought was also really interesting as well. But yeah, a bit of a fun movie. I thought it was a good movie overall. It wasn't anything great, which is why it's not A and S tier, but I think it deserves to be around like a B tier standard, at least in my opinion. But, oh boy, that is a long one. Sorry that this has been a longer video, but we had 37 movies to talk about. But that is going to be my sort of updated thoughts, discussion, and tier list on every single MCU. There's a couple of movies here that you could move around. Like I could put the Marvels down to D tier or Far From Home into B tier. And there's maybe even like one of the C tiers could even come down into B tier, from B tier to C tier. I don't know. There's some changes I could make, and will probably change if I do this video again in another year's time. But when we've got a couple more movies out. But overall, that is going to be my list. I hope you did enjoy this video. If you did, please like it by giving me a thumbs up and comment down below your thoughts on the MCU. And are you looking forward to any future projects? And subscribe if you are new. But for now, this is the Nerdy Grail signing off. I hope you've had an amazing day, and I will see you all next time. Bye for now, everyone.